Welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Makbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we are going to be taking a look at two very important discussions. And these, of course, center around where the country is standing today, especially in terms of the kind of economic challenges that we face. This is important in terms of course, what lies ahead in the remaining fiscal year. The first topic that we're going to be discussing is the Chief of Army Staff's maiden visit to Saudi Arabia, in which he met the leadership of Saudi Arabia, and he'll be there till the 10th of January. And of course, is going to be talking about a range of issues that focus on our relationship with the country, and also, of course, on political and security domains. There is going to be a lot of conversation, of course, around the fact that what this trip is going to bring about, especially in terms of the kind of economic challenges that we face, since we're hoping and depending a lot on our friendly countries to help and support us in this difficult time. And of course, Saudi Arabia is one of the countries who has done so regularly in the past. The Chief of Army Staff met with his counterpart and the Defense Minister as well in Saudi Arabia, and a number of other meetings are also scheduled to be held. But of course, what remains to be seen is whether or not the Saudi Arabia is going to come ahead with responding to Pakistan's challenges at the moment, especially in terms of the financial help that it requires without the IMF program, because of course that also is something that still hangs in the balance, and which of course brings us to the next segment of today's show, in which we're going to be focusing on the kind of economic challenges that Pakistan is facing, and then of course the government's response to that, which of course has taken many tough measures in the past and still is doing so. There is the development of the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif calling the IMF director, the managing director, and speaking to her with regards to ease of conditions, considering the 9th review and the IMF bailout package, which is something that Pakistan is relying heavily on, and perhaps the cash inflow coming in from friendly countries as Saudi Arabia and China also depends upon. So we're going to be taking a look at what that means in terms of the negotiations that have been held so far between leaders from the finance ministry with the IMF, and what sort of a consequence is the call from the Prime Minister is going to be in this regard. And also, of course, the expected meeting on the sidelines of the conference to be held in Geneva with regards to climate change issues for Pakistan, which has now been termed as the International Conference for Climate Change, Climate Resilient Pakistan, something perhaps a little different from what was earlier being referred to as a donors conference. So we're going to be taking a look at what that means in terms of where Pakistan stands and how Pakistan is planning to provide relief to the masses, because the conditions and the requirements that so far we understand is coming in from the IMF is going to bring perhaps more troubling times for the common people, and unfortunately it is a time of difficult decisions. We're going to be taking a look at this then in the next segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Patafi in the studios. For our first segment with regards to the Chief of Army Staff's visit to Saudi Arabia, we've also been joined by Mr. Umer Karim, who's a political analyst, and Brigadier retired Mr. Rashid Wali Janjua, who's also a political analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the debate today. Let me start with you, Janjua Saab. Considering our, of course, very important dynamic with Saudi Arabia and our history with this country, this is, of course, a relationship that we really treasure and that we really hope to get a lot out from. But considering that this has been a very difficult time for Pakistan, and seems, of course, that in the remaining fiscal year as well, we'll be dealing with difficult challenges. There are, of course, a lot of security concerns that Pakistan is currently dealing with. What do you make of the Chief of Army Staff's maiden visit to Saudi Arabia, and the kind of hopes that we have from the country at this difficult time, whether or not this particular visit is going to act as a catalyst towards achieving them?
Thank you very much, Sana. This visit of Chief of Army Staff is a traditional visit, and our ties with Saudi Arabia have been consistent, coherent, and those are premised upon certain bonds which transcend transitory issues. There are two elements. One is the security part of our relationship, and the second is the religious affinity and the ideological bond between which people to people level we are connected with Saudi Arabia. And our people, they revere And out of that reverence flows this close connectivity. Now, Saudi Arabia is not the old Saudi Arabia. It is also passing through a new development phase. Their vision 2030 is a clear roadmap for that. And they are diversifying their economy, and they are looking at those relationships that include the economic stakes besides the security and other affiliations. Now, this visit is very, very important because Saudis have traditionally regarded the Pakistan military's cooperation with Saudi Arabia as something that undergirds the security of Saudi Arabia as well. And they know it that they can rely on Pakistan's defense forces in any case of emergency, and time has proven that. Now, because of that, the military relationship acts as a substrate and a glue that bind all those layers of relations, which are obviously our large diaspora. We have 2.5 million Pakistanis. They repatriate 6 billion annually, which is very important. Now, Saudi Arabia has started looking outwards for, its trade and other relationships, and Pakistan figures in very important in this. And at the core of all those relationships, the economic security emerges as something that is very, very important. And they are fully cognizant of the fact who sits in the catbird seat, and the Office of Chief of Army Staff is very important. Traditionally, it has played a very important role in military diplomacy to bring all those layers together. And it is also at this juncture where Pakistan is beset with balance of payments issues as well. So our economic, some of the help that Saudi Arabia can render, that is also something very important that will emerge out of this visit. And if we combine the economics, security, and the Vision 2030, the diversification of Saudi economy, then there are great opportunities, and some of those opportunities are in the corporate farming, agriculture, solar energy. Saudi Arabia is looking for oil refinery at Gwadar. Then there is a huge untapped potential. The Saudi Arabia, it imports 150 billion. It's a consumer economy. And out of that 150 billion US dollars annually, Pakistan's share is minimal. So herein lies a great opportunity for our businessmen to go for trade, because we should metamorphose from aid dependency to trade linkages. And after that, we know that
right, absolutely. And Janjua Sahab, that's an important point, considering, of course, our trade relations with Saudi Arabia, and we, of course, need to develop those further. But Mr. Umer, let me also once again talk a little bit more about the kind of cooperation that can exist on the security challenges as well. Of course, Pakistan is dealing with the issue of a spike in terrorist activities, and we, of course, have had a lot of concerns with regards to how we're going to be going forward in terms of our strategy towards this menace. And of course, the issue of terrorism is not something that is limited to Pakistan alone. It is something that presents itself as a global challenge. What sort of cooperation do you think can possibly exist between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia to deal with this menace?
I think Pakistan and Saudi Arabia both agree on the threat terrorism poses to both countries, specifically religiously affiliated extremism. And I think within both countries, there have been programs, there have been projects that are dealing with such issues on an ideological level as well. Actually, in Pakistan, we pride ourselves on having a very sophisticated reform program for and rehabilitation program for those who were involved in terror activities. And similarly, in Saudi Arabia, they have developed a similar sophisticated program. So I think there can be some cooperation on that. Other than that, I think that there would be a lot of exchange of notes between the two sides. Our army chief has met because he was not working in the GHQ before. So that's why this is his first official engagement with the Saudi General Staff, especially Air Marshal Roveli and the Land Forces Chief General Fahad Al Mutair. So this is interesting because usually when you are within the general headquarters or associated with the army chief in one or other capacity, you are dealing with them. But because he is in a way a new person in this seat, so that's why it would be interesting how this engagement takes place. But again, he's not a new person when it comes to Saudi Arabia, because he has served in Saudi Arabia and knows the land very well. I think that the Saudi land forces, they are also undergoing processes of modernization in various domains. There can also be some exchange of notes in the air defense domain, because air defense has primarily become Saudi Arabia's mainstay with regards to the Houthi missile and drone attacks. So I think that Pakistan can give some input in this domain specifically, other than, we do have regular exercises with each other, and we do have regular anti-terrorism operations exercises related to that domain as well. But I think that this air defense domain is particularly one where the Saudis will be really interested in hearing from Pakistan. And also, this is another important point which we should always make, that Pakistan is the only country which has forces on ground in Saudi Arabia. I mean, they do have a huge defense cooperation with the US and many other countries, but practically they do trust upon the Pakistani side for forces on ground. So I think that this is a new start. There will be uh, both sides are trying to understand
Right, all right.
what are the
And these are
priorities.
important aspects, also considering the kind of relationship that we continue to enjoy with Saudi Arabia, and the kind of credibility that exists for the relationship with Pakistan. And Farooq, perhaps the Chief of Army Staff's maiden visit is an evidence towards how we value the relationship with Saudi Arabia and what this means for us. But I want to also understand, considering especially the kind of economic challenges that exist, it seemed that this time around, even countries we have had very deep historical ties with are still considering their options when it comes to helping Pakistan. Of course, we've had a help and support coming in from Saudi Arabia, but considering the IMF package and the challenging times that exist, there is perhaps a concern that exists. Do you think that there is possibly any sort of evaluations in terms of where Pakistan stands in the Saudi perspective, how this relationship is being valued? Do you see any sort of change, or do you think that there is any sort of considerations involved now that were perhaps not there before?
Right, Sana. While you were asking this question, I was wondering how to actually broach this subject, that there are de facto realities and there are de jure realities. As per de jure realities, money matters are not the army chief's purview, not his concern at all. But of course, in the past, we have seen the military diplomacy, especially during the time of General Bajwa, that he used to actually take special interest in financial matters and used to interact with foreign leaders, especially at many stages he intervened and we got some kind of bailout. One can expect some kind of financial benefit coming out of the recent interactions, but here's the proper context. When I was listening to other participants, and they have covered most of the ground already, let me compare the visits to Saudi Arabia in this way. That whenever a new leader takes over in the US, the first visit is usually to Canada, and in Europe to UK. So that is how they actually go about, visiting countries. And if they break this order, usually it is thought that something is amiss. In Pakistan, because Pakistan has its own geographical context and religious context, our leaders first go to the Middle East, and then, of course, to China as well. But regarding this visit, usually prime ministers also do that, army chiefs also do that, because Pakistan, in Pakistan's particular political context, the army itself is very important and the army chief is very important. But having said that, earlier you were talking about Pakistan going through very difficult times. Guess what? Another country is also going through very difficult times. It has gone through very difficult times, and that is Saudi Arabia itself. Saudi Arabia was repeatedly being attacked from Yemen by Houthi, rebels, and they kept on attacking Saudi Arabia. At that time, Saudi Arabia actually cobbled together a coalition of the willing from the Muslim countries, including Pakistan, which was initially headed by a Pakistani general. They also created a counter-terrorism center that was inaugurated by President Trump. Both these countries have a lot in common, and they need to work in tandem as well. It was correctly pointed out that Pakistan's forces are stationed in Saudi Arabia. If you remember those parliamentary debates back then, we were being asked to take an offensive stance in Yemen, and our lawmakers and our rulers actually decided, because there was a debate in the parliament as well, that Pakistan is going to commit itself to the safety and security of Saudi Arabia. And this is what we have been doing. Recently, we have seen certain other developments as well in this region. Pakistan Army has played a role. You must have seen the Soccer World Cup in Qatar. There also our armed forces provided security. So all of this actually develops a perspective, a background where the cooperation will continue to take place. And because of that, of course, whenever Pakistan is in economic dire straits, Saudi Arabia also usually steps in. At this moment, our foreign currency reserves are dipping below, they have dipped below $6 billion. So naturally, there is expectation that there is going to be some kind of a bailout being offered by Saudi Arabia, UAE as well. By the way, this visit includes Arab Emirates, and from 4th to 10th, because it started on 4th, there's going to be a component in UAE as well. So let us hope in coming days we see some kind of help or some kind of investment coming from there. But in the end, of course, Pakistan has to put its own house in order. Sana.
Right, absolutely. Janjua Saab, considering this important dynamic and the way that we're going to be moving forward with, what do you think in terms of not just perhaps the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, but the entire region, especially when we talk about problems that face the Muslim Ummah and that are global concerns and perhaps require a global collective response, even issues like the climate change issues that we're going to be presenting very soon at the conference on the 9th. Can there be some sort of cooperation or a front that can be taken collectively by countries such as Saudi Arabia?
Of course, it can be taken, and it has been taken in the past as well. Pakistan's congruence with the Saudi policies on, several geopolitical aspects, as well as forums like Human Rights Council in United Nations, even UN Security Council, FATF, and there are economic forums like IMF where Saudi votes count a lot because of their economic clout. So all those congruences redound to the benefit of Pakistan, and it's in the fitness of things that this relationship should be strengthened, capitalizing on the strengths and the mutual complementarities that we have. And those complementarities have that we have a highly skilled diaspora that is working. We have labor class also, and our diaspora is working in very important, as appointments also. So we should concentrate on upscaling our human resource so that they find more valuable slots and are more useful and valuable to both the countries, and in consonance with the vision 2030 of Saudi Arabia. And then as regards the regional security policies like Turkey,
Right, absolutely.
you see, in Saudi Arabia has always been in congruence, and despite our differences with Saudi Arabia on their Syria and Iran policies, those have never been publicly aired so as not to create any kind of frictions. And I think there are greater complementarities, and Saudi Arabia can help us on many international forums, including UN Security Council, and especially forums like FATF, where there are adversarial undercurrents for Pakistan.
Right. Mr. Umer Karim, of course, another dynamic that was important in terms of how the international community is viewing us is the political dynamics within the country that unfortunately saw a lot of instability in the past year. And there was, of course, a lot of concerns in terms of our relationships with many important countries. And there were a lot of involvement of a rhetoric that was centered around our institutions. And so I want to understand whether or not this has had any impact on our relationship with countries like Saudi Arabia or the UAE, and moving forward, how do you think that we can proceed in a way which strengthens the resolve, that strengthens the historic ties and the kind of economic benefit that exists in our partnership with such countries, and not let the kind of domestic or political concerns that have been hampering our relationships with other countries affect these countries as well?
Yeah, definitely. You are absolutely right. Whenever there is instability of any kind in a country, it affects all domains, and definitely it affects its foreign relationships. Unfortunately, it is the failure of our political class to develop an agreement or understanding on these critical issues so that Pakistan's relationships with these crucial partners are not affected. But somehow they do become part of the broader political wrangling. But I think that the new government in Pakistan, I mean, now it has been there for some months, 9 months. They have coordinated with the Saudi and Emirati leadership constantly. So there is some sort of a trust between them. And now this important posting of in the GHQ. Of course, the Saudis were looking very keenly on that, and they wanted to learn from the new army chief what are his views on regional security, on different regional files, regional dynamics, and I think that that will further affirm, that will further strengthen the trust and partnership, strategic partnership which we hold with
right,
Saudi
absolutely.
Arabia.
And that is, of course, the hope that we want to achieve from this, and of course other relationships as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Umer Karim, for joining us and being a part of the discussion, and Brigadier Retired Mr. Rashid Wali Janjua for also sharing your views. That's all that we have from this segment. We'll take a short break here and continue with the next one.
era of global news coverage, we aim to tell the truth. Through meticulous discussions and in-depth analyses about stories that matter the most. We underline key events as and when they happen. Watch Newsroom with me, Umer Karim, for a daily roundup of the latest international and local top stories.
Of discussions that have been going around for quite some time. We're going to be taking a look at this and, of course, the kind of discussions that have happened and the development around the Prime Minister's call to the IMF MD and the discussion around moving forward with the kind of conditions that have been put in place. We've been joined for this by Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, who's the former advisor, Ministry of Finance, and, of course, Farooq is part of the discussion as well. Let me start with you, Dr. Khaqan. Why do you think there has been, first of all, a need from the Prime Minister to get in touch with the IMF MD, and how important do you think that this call will be in terms of us getting the benefit that we hope from the IMF with regards to where we're stuck at the moment, and whether or not this is putting a question mark on what negotiations have been had in the past, because it seems, of course, that we were hearing a lot in terms of how the progress is being made, but do you think that the call is something that has happened before? There is a normalcy to it, and as opposed to what is being discussed?
Sana, thank you for having me. Patafi Saab, Assalamu Alaikum. We have to remember that these are unprecedented times. And when I say unprecedented times, I mean there is a global economy running high inflation. There is a global economy which is coming out of the aftershocks of the Ukraine war. There is a global economy with a commodity price hike. There is a Pakistan economy which has just come out of a flood shock. There is a Pakistan economy which is facing huge political instability. There is a Pakistan economy where our balance of payments is challenged, meaning that we ran a high current account when we finished FY22, and we have curtailed our imports, but our exports have gotten hurt, our remittances are slow. So it's an extremely challenging and a difficult constellation for Pakistan. Delaying the IMF, in my opinion, from February of 2022, when we got finally to do the 7th and the 8th review on the 29th of August with the board approval, hurt. It hurt that our inflows slowed down. When our inflows slow down, what you see today, Sana, you have $5.6 billion in the kitty. You had $18 billion in the kitty in December 2021. Gradually, we lost on the average $1 billion a month because the inflows were slower, but our needs to pay the current account and the debt payments was higher. So now, again, there has been a delay with the IMF. 3rd November was the expectation of the technical team to arrive in Pakistan. Today we stand on 6th of January and we are still in pre-technical negotiations. The negotiations that you talked about are about us supplying them the data. Then there was a slowdown because the flood data, the flood spending, the flood slowdown on the economy, the impact of that was all being ascertained. Now there is a need, there is an urgency. We have really hit a point in our foreign exchange reserves where we are in an uncomfortable zone. So I'm glad that there is a realization with the authorities that IMF needs to be done, whether we get complementary monies from others, but IMF has to be on board. I am hoping that this call would expedite that process. I'm hoping the call also means that the flood impact is making it hard for the government to take steps which may cause a little bit of more distress to the average Pakistani in terms of prices. So this is where we stand. But I think the call is necessary as we are not moving forward towards the technical discussions. So maybe a nod by the higher
Okay,
ups in the
Dr.
IMF.
Khaqan, you mentioned, of course, the figure of $5.6 billion, which is quite something that is being spoken about. Yet we, of course, hear something being reiterated by the finance ministry that there is no default happening anytime soon, and that we will be getting help coming in from countries like Saudi Arabia and China. Can we hope for that without the IMF's ninth review being completed, without the IMF's bailout package being secured?
Sana, that's an excellent point of discussion. First, even if there is a comfort that there is going to be no default, we don't want to take the reserves to the level of 1 month of our imports. We in economics, we say that 3 months of imports are a comfortable level. So we have to remember that, besides the talk of all this default, there is a talk of keeping the macro prudential economy strong, and that means that we needed to have at least, right now, let's say at least a double digit figure with the SPP. Now, I have always felt that the monies from the friendly countries, the monies from bilaterals and other multilateral partners, are to complement the IMF program. Right now, we have reached a stage where I am willing to believe that if KSA gives us a $3 billion deposit, it would supplement this 5.6 and take it us to near 8 billion. But IMF is the first order of business because the other things are complementary. And the reason IMF is the first order of business is that it is considered a doctor of the last resort. It gives you a stamp of approval that yes, you are in distress, but the distress reforms are now in place, whether that's on the electricity, whether that's on the budgeting and fiscal side, whether that's on the external sector side. So I think that reform approval by the IMF will also help you muster more funds and take your reserves to a more comfortable level. So, in my opinion, just getting funds from friendly countries can delay the process by another couple of months, but solving us out of a difficult and a challenging constellation has still got to go with the IMF in the first place, followed by all the friendly countries. And then there is more work with the friendly countries, Sana. The things don't stop here. Why do I say that?
Okay,
We need
I
to.
understand that, and Farooq, I want to understand the kind of tough measures that are required while we proceed with that. There is, of course, a lot of discussion around what tough measures or conditions are being requested from the IMF and how much pressure they're going to put on the common man and the current economic conditions. But there are decisions that the government has taken, such as the flood levy that we were discussing, or the taxes on banks. Do you think that this can actually help in the short run and perhaps satisfy the IMF to a level where we can at least for now be able to get a way forward, and then we're able to then move towards the increase of energy prices and other conditions that the IMF keeps talking about?
Right, Sana, I think that these ideas, these out-of-box solutions are there, and I think that they can work, but we'll have to actually look at the holistic picture, how it is going to actually impact our economic sector, how exactly is it going to affect banking and other various aspects of the country's economy. But having said that, I'm really glad that the Prime Minister has actually taken the front seat on these matters, because until Mr. Ismail Sahab was there was some kind of equation or chemistry that had developed. But after, Dar Saab came, there was this assumption, I guess, at that time, because he has dealt with IMF many a times. So this time it is going to be easier to do that as well. It didn't happen that way, Sana. Perhaps because of two or three things. One, it is one time too many. Pakistan repeatedly keeps on going back to IMF, and then of course there are conditionalities, and one has to from time to time seek relaxation as well. Secondly, perhaps Sri Lanka also somehow created some kind of environment where the fund got convinced that you have to, offer some kind of tough love. Without that, nothing is going to go forward. And finally, of course, because of our own domestic, circumstances also, we have this penchant for own goal as well. For example, the fact that we are still debating, funds from KSA, and I remember that only weeks ago, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia actually wanted to come to Pakistan, and there he would have actually inaugurated the refinery, 10 billion, $15 billion worth of refinery in Gawada. But unfortunately, because that was the time when Imran Khan Sahab decided to actually march on Islamabad and said that they are going to paralyze the capital, that was also scuttled. So, because of these circumstances, also there is some kind of inflexibility. The Prime Minister, when he talks to the leadership of IMF, remember, there is a political component, Sana, and then there is a bureaucratic component. Usually from the leadership or the democratic component, what we have been hearing is all good news and kind words. But when we look at how it trickles down through the bureaucracy, there have been, hiccups, and we have seen that we are also on the receiving end of tough love. So finally, it seems that Prime Minister, when he talks to the leader of IMF, or for that matter, other similar kind of institutions, there is some kind of leeway that there can be, accelerated pace of help or the procedures. Let us hope in coming days we can also reform ourselves. But honestly, Sana, at this moment,
Right.
33 million Pakistanis have been impacted by floods. Our economy is badly broken because of floods, because of COVID, because of international circumstances. We have to go for reforms, but there will have to be some concessions that the fund and its associated institutions have to make. Without that, nothing can happen. And sadly, so far, it has been actually foot dragging. We'll have to convince our finance
Right, and
ministry,
we hope that we can
and
proceed
also
with that, and
the
we
fund.
hope to see that sort of change there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, Farooq. Also what?
No, no, I was just pointing out that there are people who have been traditionally opposed to the idea of going to IMF, but the frank thing, the fact is that, IMF is the doctor of last resort. He is it is the, doctor and lender of last resort. So you'll have to go there. We'll have to convince people at home as well that it is absolutely compulsory, and then we also need to convince all IMF and its board as well. So I'm hoping that in coming days when we go to Geneva, there too we can have that kind of argument, and there might be accelerated pace of help that comes to Pakistan.
Right, Dr. Khaqan, considering the fact that this is an important aspect right now, and we keep on emphasizing the IMF package at this moment, but what Farooq was saying was an important point with regards to the finance ministry and, of course, the top political leadership, and perhaps everyone to be on the same page with regards to the significance that is now that exists with the IMF. Do you think that that sort of alignment is there now, and we don't really need any convincing at home, at least in terms of what is the importance or urgency from the IMF? And then moving forward, also when we talk about what is going to happen on the sidelines of the Geneva conference, whether or not do you think that a lot of that is going to be dependent upon the discussions that are going to be held around climate change issues with the rest of the countries gathered there? Because there was a distinction made at the naming of the conference, and people were talking about how the semantics can be ignored, but there may be a reason behind it, don't you think?
So, on the first part, I think there has been hesitancy on the part of the government to move to IMF. And understandably, because usually the IMF programs are done in the first 3 years of a government. Whenever the governments take over, they do the IMF program, they build the reserves, they stabilize the economy, and then they move on. Right now, it's a difficult time period because you're on the last leg, you're on the last 6 to 8 months, and you're in an IMF program where you're trying to do reform priorities, where usually the governments like to spend, get the electorate on board. But I think having spent this time, they have realized that there is no alternative here. There is no alternative to doing the pricing changes on the electricity and the gas, and the flood levy and the charge on the banks, and a bit on movement on the currency as well. Which I think is hurting us in a sense, where the open market rate hovering 25 rupees higher than the interbank is asking people to move towards the open market, and so hurts our remittances. So these are the kinds of things that we need to do with the IMF. That at all doesn't stop us from doing some more work on privatization and other areas, which I think you will also see, because you need to muster up dollars. On the flood front, I have been very uncomfortable with the response that we've had from the international community. I think here you give credit to the government, you give credit to the Foreign Office and the Finance Ministry and the planning, who've tried to put figures, facts, and you have to go at the district level and get all this data, and you have an estimate of about $16 billion. So now what I'm hoping is that the last UN appeal of 850 million got us what, 250 million. I'm hoping that we will have something for 2023 at least, a couple of $1 billion for building the infrastructure, for helping on the social side, and not only project loans, but some grants as well. I hear
Right,
the French
Dr. Saab,
president.
Dr. Saab, well, I understand that we are running out of time, but let me also ask a question very quickly, although I wanted to also compliment you. You're looking very spiffy. But the question was regarding what could be done better. If you are worried about the response from the international community and you are looking at Pakistan's approach to the matter, how else would have you, had you been a policymaker, broached the subject or gone about the matter?
So one, Patafi Sahab, I have advised many countries. I've worked for Pakistan a lot. I would have not delayed the IMF at all. When a country is in a balance of payments challenge, you don't want to go the Ghana or the Sri Lanka way. You want to remain orderly in movement. And you also have to remember Pakistan is a country of 230 million people. We want to maintain orderly movement of the currency, orderly movement of our macro fundamentals, and our social order should remain intact, where the supplies of basic commodities, pharmaceuticals reach the people of Pakistan. And so I would not have delayed the seventh review or the eighth review. And this is what I did for the government in 2016. Pakistan's first ever program to be completed, and none of you guys even knew what was happening. We took the reserves over to $24 billion, and we were in a different ball game.
Yeah,
Our
absolutely.
so let's hope we move that way. I
Absolutely,
dearly
Dr. Khaqan. And that's really important, which is why we need experts like you to speak more about this. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And thank you very much, Farooq, of course, for being part of the discussion. And let me compliment both of you. We're looking great, but thank you regardless. And of course, we really hope that there is going to be a lot of change at the economic and political front, and that we hope that the kind of discussions that are being spread about are no longer there in terms of what we see in the future and the kind of challenges that exist. But these are tough times, and we hope that our country can see better ones soon. But the government and the political leadership is doing the best that we can, and hopefully we'll be able to see some positive results coming in from the upcoming conference and, of course, from the IMF as well. That's all that we have from the debate. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you Monday.